The metallic click of a seatbelt was the only sound she intended to make. Seated in the plush leather of seat 2A in the first-class cabin, Dr. Evelyn Reed was invisible, and that was precisely how she wanted it. But a shadow of arrogance fell over her, followed by a voice dripping with condescension. "Lost dear economy is that way toward the back." The woman draped in gaudy jewelry gestured dismissively with a perfectly manicured hand. She saw a black woman in a simple cashmere sweatsuit and assumed she was out of place. She assumed wrong. She had no idea she wasn't just talking to a passenger. She was talking to the architect of the very system that allowed this plane to fly. And in 10 minutes, that architect was going to burn it all to the ground. The first-class cabin of Global Wings Airlines Flight 88 from New York's JFK to London Heathrow was designed to be a hermetically sealed bubble of tranquility. It was a world away from the frantic energy of the terminal, a curated space of muted greys, polished chrome, and the gentle, indiscriminate hiss of recycled air. For Dr. Evelyn Reed, it was a temporary office, a dining room, and most importantly, a sanctuary 8 miles above the earth where the demands of her world couldn't reach her. At 42, Evelyn had cultivated an aura of serene command. She wasn't flashy. She didn't need to be. Her power wasn't in what she wore, but in what she knew. Today her attire was a testament to quiet luxury, a charcoal grey cashmere sweatsuit by Loro Piana, and simple slip-on leather sneakers. Her hair was styled in intricate locks, adorned with a few subtle silver cuffs that caught the light. On her wrist was a modest functional watch, its face displaying multiple time zones. She carried no flashy designer handbag, only a worn leather satchel that contained a laptop, a tablet, and a series of bound technical manuals. To the undiscerning eye, she was comfortable. To the discerning eye, her comfort was more expensive than most people's formal wear. She slid into seat 2A, a window seat in the forwardmost cabin, and began her ritual. The satchel was stowed neatly in the overhead bin. A bottle of San Pellegrino, requested from the flight attendant upon boarding, sat unopened on the console. She pulled a well-worn paperback from her pocket, its spine broken and its pages soft. This 7-hour flight was a rare gift, a forced disconnect. No Wi-Fi, no frantic calls from her development teams in Silicon Valley or her logistics coordinators in Frankfurt. Just the gentle hum of the Rolls-Royce Trent engines and the prospect of losing herself in a story. Her company Aerosync Solutions was the invisible nervous system of the modern aviation industry. While passengers saw the airline's logo on the tail fin, they never saw the complex web of software that Aerosync designed, implemented, and managed. Aerosync's proprietary platform, Nexus, handled everything from crew scheduling and fleet management to gate allocation and dynamic flight path optimization. If an airline wanted to get its planes off the ground on time, and with the right people, and cargo, they used Nexus. Global Wings Airlines was one of their biggest clients, their entire North American operation running on the intricate code Evelyn's teams wrote and maintained. She was flying to London to oversee the final implementation stages of Nexus 4.0 across their European network. This trip was in a very literal sense business critical. The serene atmosphere was soon punctured by the arrival of the passengers for seats 2C and 2D across the aisle. They were a couple in their late 50s, radiating an aura of loud, performative wealth. The woman who introduced herself to the flight attendant as Karen Sterling was a symphony of clashing designer labels. A Burberry trench coat was thrown carelessly over a Louis Vuitton dress, and a large gold Chanel logo dangled from her neck. Her voice was a sharp, nasal instrument that cut through the cabin's calm. Her husband, Robert, was a quieter, more subdued presence, dressed in a slightly too tight golf shirt and khaki trousers. He seemed to exist primarily to carry his wife's bags and nod in agreement. "Robert, for heaven's sake, be careful with that carry-on. It's got my serums in it," Karen brayed, shoving a garish pink roller bag into his hands. "And you," she snapped at a passing flight attendant, a young woman named Chloe, with a nervous smile. "I'll need a glass of Chardonnay before we even think about taking off. And not that dreadful domestic swill." Chloe, clearly flustered, stammered, "Of course, ma'am. Right away." Evelyn watched the exchange over the top of her book, her expression unreadable. She had encountered countless Karen Sterlings in her life and in her travels. They were a predictable breed, their sense of self-worth directly proportional to their perceived superiority over others. They thrived on manufactured conflict and the validation of seeing service staff bend to their will. Evelyn typically dealt with them by employing a strategy of complete and utter invisibility. She became part of the cabin's furniture, a silent observer. The Sterlings began the noisy process of settling in. There was a loud, dramatic sigh from Karen as she inspected her seat for imperfections. A complaint about the pillow's firmness. A demand to know the exact brand of complimentary noise-cancelling headphones. Robert fumbled with the overhead bin, nearly dropping a bag on another passenger, before grunting an apology. Evelyn tuned them out, focusing on the words on the page. She felt the gentle thrum of the auxiliary power unit through the floor, a familiar and comforting vibration. The boarding process was nearing its end. The flight attendants were making their final checks, their voices a low murmur. The captain's voice came over the intercom, a calm, reassuring baritone, announcing their flight time and wishing them a pleasant journey. Evelyn took a sip of her water, feeling the familiar anticipation of takeoff. The moment of release, when the immense power of the engines overcame the Earth's gravity, was a feeling she never tired of. It was a metaphor for her own life, a steady, powerful ascent, fueled by precision expertise, and an unyielding refusal to be held down. She closed her eyes, picturing the complex data streams her system was processing at that very moment for this specific flight. Juestes 8. She knew its weight, its fuel load, the assigned flight crew's duty hours, and the projected tailwind over the Atlantic. Her mind was a map of logistics and data. In this cabin, she was just a passenger, but in the world of Global Wings Airlines, she was the ghost in the machine, the architect of their reality, a reality that for the moment was peaceful. The cabin door was about to be sealed. Her sanctuary was almost complete. She allowed herself a small, contented sigh and turned back to her book, blissfully unaware of the storm gathering just a few feet away. The storm had a name, and its name was Karen Sterling. Karen Sterling didn't like what she saw. From the moment she had boarded, her eyes had snagged on the woman in seat 2A. A black woman, in first class, in a sweatsuit. Karen's mind, a finely tuned engine of prejudice and snap judgments, immediately flagged this as an anomaly, an error in the matrix of her world. First class was her space. It was a reward for Robert's tedious work in finance, a symbol of their station. It was for people like them, people who understood the subtle codes of wealth, the language of designer labels and dismissive tones. This woman with her simple clothes and quiet demeanor didn't fit. Karen's brain cycled through a Rolodex of possibilities, each more dismissive than the last. An airline employee on a discounted ticket, a competition winner. Perhaps even someone's personal assistant mistakenly sent to the wrong cabin. The idea that this woman could have simply paid for her ticket, that she belonged there as much as Karen did, was a concept her mind refused to compute. She watched Evelyn out of the corner of her eye, her irritation simmering like a pot left on the stove. She saw the expensive water, the comfortable ease with which the woman occupied her space. It wasn't the frantic, wide-eyed awe of a first-timer. It was the quiet confidence of someone who was used to it. And that more than anything is what truly bothered Karen. It was a challenge to her own carefully constructed sense of superiority. "Robert," she whispered, her voice a harsh hiss. "Look at that. Over there." Robert, who was trying to figure out the seat's massage function, glanced over. "What is it, dear? In 2A. Do you see her? I just don't think she's supposed to be here. It just feels off." Robert sighed, a long, weary sound. He knew this tone. It was the prelude to an unnecessary scene. "Karen, please, let's just relax. The flight hasn't even taken off." "No, Robert, this is a matter of security," she insisted, her voice rising in volume. "How do we know her ticket is even valid? People sneak into first class all the time. I read an article about it. It dilutes the experience. It's not what we pay for." The "we" was doing a lot of work in that sentence. Evelyn, though seemingly engrossed in her book, heard every word. Her posture didn't change. Her expression remained neutral. But inside a familiar weariness settled in her chest. She had played this scene before, in different five-star hotels, exclusive restaurants, and luxury boutiques. The script was always the same. Her presence was an affront to someone's preconceived notion of what a person of her race and gender should be, do, or have. Karen decided to act. She unbuckled her seatbelt with a loud theatrical click and stood up. She strode the few steps across the aisle and stopped, planting herself directly in front of Evelyn, casting a literal and metaphorical shadow. Evelyn slowly looked up from her book, her eyes calm and questioning. She didn't speak, letting the silence hang in the air, forcing Karen to state her purpose. "Excuse me," Karen began, her voice dripping with a sickly sweet, condescending tone. "I think you might be a little lost, dear. Economy is that way toward the back of the plane." She pointed a long, red-lacquered nail toward the curtain separating the cabins. Evelyn blinked slowly. She took a deliberate, slow breath before responding, her voice low, and even a stark contrast to Karen's shrillness. "I can assure you I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. Seat 2A. Well, I'm sure it's an easy mistake to make," Karen continued, unwilling to cede the floor. "But this is the first-class cabin. Perhaps you could show me your boarding pass." This was a stunning breach of etiquette, a demand no passenger ever has the right to make of another. It was a power play, pure and simple. "No," Evelyn said. The single word was not angry or defensive. It was a simple, solid statement of fact. A closed door. Karen recoiled as if slapped. "No. What do you mean, no? I am a concerned passenger. I have a right to feel safe and secure." The commotion had attracted the attention of Chloe, the young flight attendant. She hurried over her face, a mask of anxiety. "Is everything all right here, ladies?" "No, it is not all right," Karen trilled, turning on the flight attendant. "This woman is refusing to prove that she belongs in this cabin. For all we know, she could be a security threat. I insist you do something about this immediately." Chloe looked from Karen's furious, entitled face to Evelyn's unnervingly calm one. She was young, and her training had taught her to de-escalate, but it had also implicitly taught her to placate the loudest and most seemingly influential passengers. The woman in the designer clothes seemed like the safer bet. "Ma'am," Chloe said, turning to Evelyn, her voice wavering. "I'm so sorry, but for the peace of mind of the other passengers, would you mind just showing me your boarding pass?" Evelyn held Chloe's gaze for a long moment. She saw the fear in the young woman's eyes, the desperate desire to make the problem go away. She could have ended it right there, presented the pass, and silenced Karen. But something inside her hardened. This wasn't about a seat anymore. It was about a principle. The airline's representative was now officially validating a baseless, racially motivated accusation. She was being asked to prove her innocence in the court of Karen Sterling's prejudice, with the airline acting as the bailiff. I showed my boarding pass to the agent at the gate, and I showed it to the attendant when I boarded. Evelyn stated, her voice still quiet, but now with a sharp steel edge. I've been verified twice. Why is a third time, prompted by this passenger's baseless accusation, suddenly necessary? She's being difficult, Karen shrieked, pointing at Evelyn. Do you see this is exactly what I'm talking about? Get her off this plane. Robert was now half standing, his face flushed with embarrassment. Karen, for God's sake, sit down. You're making a scene. I will not sit down, she retorted. Not until this is resolved. The sanctuary was broken. The quiet hum of the cabin had been replaced by a tense, ugly silence, punctuated by Karen's histrionics. Every passenger was watching now. Evelyn felt their eyes on her, a mixture of curiosity, pity, and in some cases, she suspected quiet agreement with Karen. She slowly closed her book, the moment for peaceful reading having passed. The moment for something else entirely had just begun. The situation was spiraling out of Chloe's control. Karen Sterling's voice was now at a pitch that could shatter glass, her accusations growing more frantic and unhinged. She could have a fake ticket. She could be anyone. Are you going to wait until something happens? I demand to speak to your superior. Chloe, looking pale and overwhelmed, spoke into her wrist-worn communication device. David, I need assistance in the forward cabin. A passenger dispute. A moment later, David arrived. He was the senior flight attendant, a man in his late 40s with a calm demeanor and eyes that had seen everything from medical emergencies to celebrity meltdowns. He took in the scene instantly, Karen red-faced and gesticulating wildly, Robert looking like he wanted the floor to swallow him. Evelyn still seated, her posture radiating an unnerving stillness, and Chloe looking utterly defeated. What seems to be the problem here? David asked, his voice a model of professional calm. The problem, Karen spat, is that your employee is failing to do her job. This woman refuses to verify that she's a ticketed first-class passenger, and I am not comfortable sharing a cabin with her. David turned his attention to Evelyn, his expression carefully neutral. He was better trained than Chloe. He knew this was a delicate situation. He wasn't just dealing with a seating dispute. He was navigating a minefield of potential accusations from harassment to discrimination. Ma'am, he said, addressing Evelyn with measured respect. My name is David. I am the purser on this flight. I understand you've already been verified, but in order to resolve this situation and get us on our way, I do need to ask to see your boarding pass and a form of identification. Evelyn looked at David, really looked at him. She saw a professional trying to follow a script, trying to put out a fire started by an arsonist. She could have complied. A flash of her ID, and this would be over. The flight would take off. But in that moment, she made a critical decision. This was no longer just about Karen Sterling's bigotry. This was about Global Wings Airlines' institutional response, by asking her, the target of the harassment, to once again prove her legitimacy. They were validating the aggressor. They were making her the problem to be solved, not the passenger to be protected. This was a systemic failure, and her company, AeroSync Solutions, had very specific clauses in their multi-hundred-million-dollar contract with Global Wings regarding operational integrity and personnel treatment during audits. While she wasn't on an official audit, she was AeroSync's CEO. Every interaction she had with a client service was, in effect, a performance review, and Global Wings was failing spectacularly. With all due respect, David, Evelyn replied, her voice remaining level. The issue here is not my ticket. The issue is that your airline is allowing one passenger to harass another based on nothing more than prejudice. Instead of addressing her disruptive and frankly defamatory behavior, you are further inconveniencing me. So no, I will not be showing you my documents again in this cabin. If you wish to verify my identity, you can do so against the official flight manifest at the gate, where this passenger can no longer interfere. David's professional calm flickered. This was not the expected response. He was now caught between a belligerent passenger and a passenger who was calmly and intelligently citing what amounted to a failure in company policy. "She's a lawyer," Robert Sterling muttered under his breath, finally understanding they were out of their depth. "I don't care if she's the Queen of England," Karen screeched. "The rules are the rules. If she won't comply, she needs to be removed." David knew he had reached the end of his authority. Protocol dictated the next step. He spoke quietly into his communicator. "Flight deck, this is the purser. We have an unresolved passenger conflict in the forward cabin, requesting the captain's presence or guidance." A few tense minutes passed. The other first-class passengers were now murmuring amongst themselves, their annoyance at the delay warring with the drama unfolding before them. Finally, a message was relayed back to David. The captain, wanting to avoid a further delay by coming out of the cockpit, had made a decision based on the information provided to de-escalate the passenger at the center of the dispute needed to be brought to the jet bridge with airline staff to have their credentials verified one final time. David's face tightened. He knew this was the wrong call. It punished the wrong person. But it was an order from the captain. He turned back to Evelyn, his expression one of genuine regret. "Ma'am, Captain Miller has requested that you accompany me and a gate agent back to the terminal to resolve this. I am very sorry for the inconvenience." A collective gasp went through the passengers who had been listening. They were actually going to make her deplane. Karen Sterling's face broke into a triumphant, smug smile. She had won. She shot Evelyn a venomous, victorious look and settled back into her seat, folding her arms. "Well, it's about time," she sniffed to her husband. Evelyn said nothing. The calm she had maintained on the surface was now a sheath of ice around a core of cold-focused fury. They had made their choice. They had followed their protocol, and in doing so, they had triggered a protocol of her own one with consequences they couldn't possibly imagine. Slowly, deliberately, Evelyn Reed stood up. She smoothed down her cashmere top, picked up her paperback, and looked at David. "Very well," she said, her voice quiet but resonant in the silent cabin. "Let's go." As she walked down the aisle following David toward the open door of the aircraft, she didn't look at the Sterlings. She didn't look at any of the other passengers. Her mind was already thousands of miles away, processing lines of code, contractual obligations, and kill switches. The airline had treated her as a problem. She was about to become a catastrophe. The short walk from the first-class cabin to the jet bridge felt like a mile. Evelyn was acutely aware of the dozens of eyes on her back. She could feel their judgment, their curiosity, their misplaced pity. To them, she was a woman being escorted off a plane in disgrace, a problem being removed. The truth was far more potent. She was a queen being led from the throne room, fully aware that she still held the keys to the entire kingdom. At the end of the jet bridge where the aircraft met the terminal, a flustered gate agent named Maria was waiting. She had been briefed, and her face was a mixture of apology and procedural firmness. David the purser looked deeply uncomfortable. "Ma'am, if I could just see your passport and boarding pass, we can clear this up and get you back on board," Maria said, trying to force a reassuring smile. Evelyn stopped. She didn't reach for her bag. Instead, she turned to David. "I want your name and the name of the flight attendant who first responded," she said. Her tone was not threatening. It was the flat, neutral tone of someone collecting data for a report. "It's David Foster," he said, swallowing hard. "And the other flight attendant is Chloe Webb." "Thank you, David," Evelyn said. Then she turned to Maria. "And I'll need your full name and employee ID as well." Maria stammered. "Maria Cortez, ID 724552. But ma'am, I just need to. You have sided with a belligerent passenger who harassed me based on my race." Evelyn cut her off, her voice still low, but now resonating with an authority that made both employees flinch. "You have escalated a situation by punishing the victim of the harassment. You have failed in your duty of care. And you have done so on a flight operated by a company that is in a multi-million-dollar contractual relationship with my company. This is no longer a customer service issue. This is a breach of contract." She finally reached into her satchel, but she didn't pull out her passport. She pulled out her phone. Karen and Robert Sterling, who had craned their necks to watch the proceedings from their seats, could only see the cluster of people at the door. Karen was whispering gleefully to Robert. "See, they're finally dealing with her. We'll be in the air any minute." Evelyn's fingers moved swiftly across the screen of her phone. She tapped an icon, the secure internal communications app for AeroSync Solutions. Her first call was to a name on her executive speed dial, Jonathan Pierce, her head of global operations, and her most trusted lieutenant. He was based in California, where it was the middle of the night, but he answered on the first ring, as she knew he would. "Evelyn, is everything okay?" "Jonathan, I need you to listen very carefully," she said, her voice crisp and clear. "I am at JFK on the jet bridge of Global Wings Flight 88. I have been wrongfully removed from the aircraft due to a discriminatory incident that the airline's staff has critically mishandled. I am invoking Clause 12B of our Master Service Agreement with Global Wings, the Zero Tolerance Personnel Clause." There was a moment of stunned silence on the other end of the line. Jonathan knew exactly what that meant. It was a clause they had built into their most important contracts, a nuclear option designed to protect their employees from exactly this kind of situation when they were traveling for company business. It had never been used before. "Understood, Evelyn." Jonathan's voice came back, now sharp and alert. "What are your instructions? Initiate a Level 5 system integrity. Hold on the entire Global Wings North American account, effective immediately," Evelyn commanded. "I want every single Nexus-controlled operation frozen. Gate assignments, crew scheduling, flight plan authorizations, everything. Send the automated Tier 1 alert to their operations center, citing a critical breach of contract. No further information until they hear from me directly." "Consider it done," Jonathan said. "The servers will start cascading the holds in less than 60 seconds. "Thank you, Jonathan." She ended the call. David and Maria looked on their faces, pale with confusion. They had no idea what a Level 5 system integrity hold was, but the chilling authority in her voice told them it was something far above their pay grade. Evelyn then made her second call. She looked up the contact for Global Wings, Executive Vice President of North American Operations, a man named Richard Harrison, with whom she had personally negotiated the Nexus contract. "Richard Harrison's office," a secretary answered. "This is Dr. Evelyn Reed of AeroSync Solutions. Put him on the phone. Now." The urgency and power in her name got her through immediately. "Evelyn, to what do I owe the pleasure?" Harrison's voice was breezy, oblivious. "Richard," Evelyn said, her voice now cold as ice. "I am standing on the jet bridge of your flight 8 at JFK, from which your crew has just removed me at the behest of a racist passenger. As of approximately 30 seconds ago, My company has initiated a Level 5 system integrity hold on your entire North American operation per Clause 12B of our agreement. Your network is about to grind to a halt. You have 60 seconds to get a senior executive to this gate, Gate C62, to personally apologize. And then we are going to have a very serious conversation about your future as a client." She hung up the phone. The transformation in the small space on the jet bridge was absolute. David and Maria stared at her, their mouths agape, the color draining from their faces. The name Aerosync Solutions had landed like a bomb. They may not have known the CEO's face, but they knew that name. It was the bedrock of their entire operation. The woman they had just escorted off the plane wasn't just a passenger. She was in a very real sense the one flying the planes, all of them. And in the Operations Center for Global Wings Airlines at JFK, 1,000 alarms began to scream at once. For the operations team at Global Wings Airlines, the world ended at 10:17 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. One moment, the massive wall of screens in their JFK control center showed a symphony of orderly chaos planes, taxiing flights, boarding green on-time indicators, blinking reassuringly. The next moment, the symphony devolved into a cacophony of digital shrieking. It started with a single ominous red banner at the top of their main Nexus dashboard. System integrity hold. Level 5. Account GWNA. Reason client contract breach 12B. Then came the cascade. Gate assignments for departing flights vanished, replaced with hold, pending sysadmin release. Pilots trying to file their final flight plans through the system were met with authorization denied. The automated crew scheduling system, which managed the complex dance of getting pilots and flight attendants to the right planes, froze mid-calculation. A flight that had just landed from Chicago couldn't get a gate assignment. It was stuck on the tarmac, its passengers captive. A dozen planes waiting to push back from their gates were suddenly without clearance. It was as if the airline's central nervous system had been instantly paralyzed. The software that made everything work had simply stopped working. It didn't crash. It didn't fail. It did exactly what it was told to do. It entered a state of suspended animation, a digital lockdown initiated by its highest authority. Panic erupted in the control room. Phones began ringing off the hook. Supervisors were shouting, trying to understand if it was a system crash, a cyber attack, or something else entirely. The message on the screen was cryptic but clear. This was not a technical failure. This was deliberate. Meanwhile, back at Gate C62, the air was thick with a new kind of tension. Richard Harrison, the EVP of Operations, was on the phone to the gate supervisor. His voice, a panicked, strangled roar that could be heard even from the phone's earpiece. "Where is she? Is she still there?" "Do not let her leave. I'm on my way." The gate supervisor, a man who had seen it all until today, now looked at Evelyn with a terror usually reserved for Federal Aviation inspectors. Onboard Flight 88. The passengers were growing restless. The pilot, finally alerted to the true nature of the passenger dispute, emerged from the cockpit, his face ashen. He walked directly to seat 2C. "Mr. and Mrs. Sterling," the captain said, his voice low and trembling with fury. "You need to come with me. Now." Karen Sterling, who had been preening in her victory, was taken aback. "What is the meaning of this? We are the victims here. You are the cause of a catastrophic system-wide operational failure for this airline." The captain bit out, dispensing with all customer service pleasantries. "Now get your things. You are being removed from my aircraft." The blood drained from Karen's face. Robert looked like he was about to have a heart attack. As they were escorted down the aisle, past the bewildered faces of the other passengers, their walk of shame was the inverse of Evelyn's. Hers had been a walk of quiet power. Theirs was one of public humiliation. When they reached the jet bridge, they saw the scene. Evelyn Reed stood calmly by the window, her phone now back in her bag. Several high-level airport managers had arrived, along with a visibly sweating Richard Harrison, who had just sprinted from another terminal. Harrison didn't even glance at the Sterlings. He made a beeline for Evelyn, his face a mess of terror and supplication. "Dr. Reed, Evelyn!" He panted, his expensive suit rumpled. I cannot apologize enough. There has been a misunderstanding of epic proportions. A failure of our training, of everything. Please. What can we do to make this right?" Evelyn looked at him, her expression unyielding. "What you can do, Richard, is understand the gravity of what just happened. Your staff, from the flight attendant to the captain, chose to validate a racist complaint. They treated me, your client, a client whose platform is the only reason any of your planes are moving today, or rather were moving as a security threat. This isn't a misunderstanding. It's a symptom of a deep systemic rot in your corporate culture." She gestured back toward the plane. "Your entire North American flight schedule is now frozen. At this very moment, your planes can't get gates, your crews don't know where they're going, and your booking system will soon start rejecting new tickets. I estimate that for every minute this hold stays in place, you are losing approximately $50,000 in direct operational costs and downstream revenue. It has now been," she glanced at her watch, 11 minutes. You can do the math." Harrison looked like he was going to be physically sick. Over $500,000 gone, and the meter was still running. The Sterling stood by, utterly stupefied. The world had inverted. The lost woman in the sweatsuit was talking about freezing the airline, about contracts and millions of dollars. Karen's jaw hung open, her mind finally painfully processing the magnitude of her mistake. She had picked a fight with a god. "Please, Dr. Reed," Harrison begged. "Tell us what you need. We'll do anything." Evelyn let the silence stretch out, letting him and everyone else absorb the full weight of the chaos they had unleashed. The digital tsunami she had started was now crashing over every part of their operation. She wasn't just a passenger they had wronged. She was the woman who could, with a single phone call, turn their multi-billion-dollar airline into a grounded fleet of very expensive, very useless aluminum tubes. And she was just getting started. The fallout was swift, brutal, and utterly comprehensive. For Karen and Robert Sterling, the world they had so carefully constructed, a world built on a foundation of entitlement and perceived superiority, crumbled into dust in the span of a single afternoon. Their immediate punishment was being banned from Global Wings Airlines for life. A senior security official informed them in a cold, monotone voice that their tickets were cancelled, their luggage would be returned to them at the main terminal, and they were now considered trespassers on airport property. They were escorted out by Port Authority police, a final public humiliation, as they were paraded past hundreds of delayed and angry travelers. But that was only the beginning. The story of the system-wide shutdown, though initially attributed to a technical glitch in public-facing statements, spread like wildfire within the corporate world. The name of the passenger who caused it and the reason for her actions leaked from airline employees to corporate travel agents and beyond. Robert Sterling worked as a senior portfolio manager for a prestigious Wall Street investment firm, Sterling and Finch. A major part of his firm's business involved managing accounts for corporate clients, many of whom had exclusive high-volume travel contracts with Global Wings Airlines. By Tuesday morning, the managing partner of his firm, a man named Alistair Finch, had received 3 furious phone calls. One was from his corporate travel liaison, informing him that the firm's special, negotiated rates with the airline were under review. The other two were from the CFOs of major clients, asking why an employee of Sterling and Finch was responsible for a multi-million-dollar disruption that had stranded their executives in airports across the country. Robert was summoned to Alistair Finch's corner office, a place he usually entered with a swagger. Today, he felt like a condemned man walking the last mile. Alistair, a man known for his icy demeanor, did not ask Robert to sit down. "Robert," he began, his voice dangerously quiet. "I have built this firm on two principles: fiduciary responsibility and an impeccable reputation. In the last 24 hours, you have managed to catastrophically damage both. You and your wife's behavior did not just cause a scene. It caused a direct financial and reputational crisis that is now affecting this firm, our partners, and our clients. Your personal conduct has made you a liability we can no longer afford." "Alistair, it was a mistake," Robert pleaded, his voice cracking. "My wife, she can be a bit much." "It was not a mistake, Robert. It was an act of such staggering arrogance and poor judgment that it borders on the surreal." Alistair cut him off. "You publicly harassed the CEO of a company that is fundamentally critical to global commerce. You cost our travel partner millions of dollars. And you did it all because your wife couldn't stand the sight of a black woman sitting in a seat she had paid for. Sterling and Finch is terminating your employment effective immediately. Security will escort you out." Robert staggered back as if he'd been punched. His career, his six-figure salary, his entire professional identity gone. The karma for Karen was more social, but no less devastating. She was a prominent member of her local country club and sat on the board of several high-profile charities. Her identity was woven into her social standing. Within a week, the story was the talk of her elite social circle. She was no longer seen as a powerful socialite. She was a pariah, a laughing stock. The woman who had grounded an airline because of her own bigotry. Friends stopped returning her calls. Invitations to galas and fundraisers dried up. When she showed up at the country club for her weekly tennis lesson, the other women on the court fell into a sudden icy silence. She was asked to voluntarily resign from two of her charity boards, as her continued presence was deemed detrimental to their public image. The couple had to sell their home. Without Robert's income, they couldn't afford the mortgage and the exorbitant country club fees. They downsized to a modest condo in a neighboring town, a world away from the manicured lawns and social prestige they had once taken for granted. Their friends abandoned them completely. The life they had known was over, not because of a bad investment or a market downturn, but because of a single ugly moment of prejudice on an airplane. For the airline employees, the consequences were more nuanced. Chloe Webb, the young flight attendant, was not fired. Evelyn had specifically requested that she be put through an intensive retraining program focused on de-escalation, unconscious bias, and corporate policy. Evelyn believed firing her would solve nothing. Re-educating her could create a better employee. David Foster, the purser, received a formal commendation for his professionalism under pressure, even though he had ultimately followed the captain's incorrect order. Captain Miller was suspended for a month without pay and was required to complete the same training as Chloe before being allowed to command an aircraft again. Richard Harrison, the EVP, kept his job, but his reputation was permanently tarnished. He would forever be known as the executive who had to beg for his airline's life on a jet bridge. The digital tsunami had receded, but it had reshaped the entire landscape. The hard karma had not just hit back. It had carpet-bombed the lives of those who had perpetuated the initial act of malice, proving that the cost of prejudice in a world as interconnected as ours could be impossibly devastatingly high. The Level 5 system integrity. hold the digital cataclysm that had brought North America's third-largest airline to its knees lasted for precisely 94 minutes. For the executives at Global Wings Airlines, it was the longest hour and a half of their professional lives. It was an $80 million lesson in humility, a real-time, financially excruciating demonstration of their dependence on the woman they had allowed their staff to discard like a piece of lost luggage. The system blinked back to life only after the CEO of the airline's parent company, a titan of industry named Charles Kensington, personally called Evelyn's cell phone. His voice, usually a confident baritone in financial news interviews, was strained and stripped of all its usual bravado. He offered a profound, unconditional, and desperate apology. But an apology, Evelyn knew, was merely a bandage on a gaping wound. It did nothing to treat the underlying infection. What she demanded was surgery. 2 weeks later, she walked into the gleaming, monolithic headquarters of Global Wings in Dallas. The lobby, with its soaring atrium and a suspended vintage aircraft, was designed to inspire awe. Today, it felt like a mausoleum. Evelyn's arrival had been anticipated with the kind of nervous dread usually reserved for a hostile takeover bid. She was not there as a passenger or a vendor. She was there as a reckoning. Dressed in a sharply tailored navy blue suit and carrying a simple leather portfolio, she moved through the space with an air of absolute command. She was escorted to the top-floor boardroom by a nervous junior executive who couldn't quite meet her eye. Inside, the entire executive board was assembled. 12 men and 1 woman, all in expensive suits, sat around a vast, polished mahogany table that reflected their anxious faces. At the head of the table was Charles Kensington. To his right sat Richard Harrison, the EVP of Operations, who looked 10 years older than he had on the jet bridge. Evelyn declined the offer of a seat. She preferred to stand, placing her portfolio on the table and opening it to reveal a single tablet. She looked slowly around the room, making eye contact with each board member, letting the silence build. "Good morning." She began, her voice calm and clear, yet it seemed to absorb all the sound in the room. "Let's be very clear about why we are here. We are not here to discuss a customer service complaint. We are not here to negotiate a discount on your next contract renewal. We are here to dismantle a piece of your corporate culture that has become a liability of the highest order." She tapped her tablet, and the massive screen at the end of the boardroom flickered to life. It displayed a stark, minimalist graph. "This," she said, "is a timeline of the 94 minutes your North American operations were offline. And this," she tapped again, and numbers began to populate the screen, "is the cost." The board members leaned forward, their expressions ranging from horror to disbelief. Evelyn had broken it down with surgical precision. Delayed crew costs, 4.2 excess fuel. Burn tarmac, holds, 7-point passenger. Rebooking and compensation, 87 cancelled flights, 33.5 FAA non-compliance. Fines projected, 2.5 brand damage and market cap fluctuation, 2-hour period, 31 metro total. Quantifiable loss, $79,000, $80 million, Evelyn said, letting the number hang in the air, because a passenger was deemed lost in first class, because your staff at every level from the junior flight attendant to the captain in command chose to validate a baseless racist complaint. They defaulted to a protocol that protects the comfort of the aggressor over the dignity and rights of the victim. This wasn't a failure of 1 or 2 individuals. This was a catastrophic failure of your system, your training, and your culture. Kensington cleared his throat. "Dr. Reed, on behalf of everyone here, I want to reiterate how profoundly sorry we are. We have already taken disciplinary action." Evelyn held up a hand, silencing him. "Disciplinary action is reactive, Charles. I am interested in a proactive solution. You have a systemic illness. I am here to prescribe the cure. These are my terms for the continuation of the business relationship between Aerosync Solutions and Global Wings Airlines. They are not negotiable." She swiped the screen on her tablet. A new document appeared titled The Dignity in the Skies Initiative. First, Global Wings would immediately commission and fund a comprehensive independent third-party audit of all its customer service conflict resolution and security protocols. And to be clear, Evelyn added, looking directly at Kensington, the auditing firm will be one that my team vets and approves. We need unvarnished truth, not a friendly review. Second, a new mandatory annual training module for all 80,000 Global Wings employees worldwide was to be developed. It would not be a 20-minute click-through presentation on diversity. It would be an intensive scenario-based program designed by leading sociologists and civil rights experts, focusing on unconscious bias, de-escalation tactics, and the legal and financial ramifications of discrimination. Aerosync will have full oversight and final approval on the curriculum, she stated. I will not have this critical initiative diluted by your HR department's preference for toothless corporate platitudes. Third, a new transparent and expedited reporting system for passengers who experience harassment or discrimination would be created. This couldn't be a web form that disappeared into the ether. It would be a dedicated 24/7 hotline and app-based feature staffed by a specially trained team empowered to offer immediate resolutions, including rebooking on other carriers, full refunds, and banning offending passengers. Finally, she pointed to the last item on the list. Global Wings would establish a $10 million charitable foundation, the Reed Initiative for Aviation and Technology, which would provide scholarships and mentorship programs for Black, Indigenous, and other minority students, pursuing careers in aerospace engineering, logistics, and computer science. You will invest in the people who will one day build a more equitable industry, she said. The room was silent. The scope of her demands was breathtaking. It was a complete operational and cultural overhaul dictated by a client. One board member, a hard-nosed former CFO, finally spoke up. Dr. Reed, with all due respect, the cost of implementing these initiatives will be astronomical. Evelyn turned her gaze to him, her eyes like chips of ice. I have just shown you that the cost of not implementing them is $80 million in 94 minutes. Do you really want to gamble on what the cost would be for a full day or a week? This is not an expense. This is the most important investment in your company's future you will ever make. Charles Kensington looked at the determined faces of his board, then back at the unwavering figure of Evelyn Reed. He knew he had no choice. They had been completely and utterly outmaneuvered. We agree to all your terms, Dr. Reed. He said the words, tasting like ash in his mouth. You have my word. Evelyn nodded slowly. Your word is a start, Charles. My team will be embedding with yours next week to begin the oversight process. Your airline's performance will no longer be measured solely by on-time arrivals, but by your commitment to the dignity of every single person who steps onto your planes. 3 months passed. They were months of intense, grueling work. Evelyn's top lieutenant, Jonathan Pierce, led a team from Aerosync that worked hand in glove with a newly formed task force at Global Wings. They met resistance from middle management, who saw the new training as a waste of time, but Jonathan, armed with Evelyn's full authority, quashed it without mercy. Evelyn herself reviewed every line of the new training curriculum. She rejected the first draft, sending it back with scathing notes. Too much corporate jargon. Replace synergistic inclusivity with how not to racially profile a passenger. Use the transcript from the G-188 incident as a case study in what to avoid. The work was hard, but slowly a change began to take root. Then came the day Evelyn once again found herself at JFK Gate C-62, preparing to board the flight to London. As she approached the gate, the agent, a woman she didn't recognize, looked at her boarding pass, and then up at her, a look of genuine recognition and respect in her eyes. "Welcome, Dr. Reed. We are honored to have you fly with us today. I hope you have a wonderful flight." The greeting felt different, not fawning but professional and warm. On board, she was led to seat 2A. The cabin felt brighter, the atmosphere less stuffy. As she settled in, she watched a flight attendant patiently and kindly deal with an elderly man who was confused about his seat assignment, exhibiting a level of empathy that felt new. Just before the cabin door was closed, her phone buzzed. It was an email from a name she hadn't expected to see: Chloe Webb. The young flight attendant had completed her retraining and had been back on duty for a month. The email was short and heartfelt. "Dear Dr. Reed, I don't know if you'll read this, but I wanted to thank you. Not for what happened that day, but for what happened after. I was terrified I would be fired, and I probably deserved it. But being given the chance to go through the new training program, it changed how I see my job and, frankly, how I see the world. I understand now what my responsibility is. It's not just about serving drinks. It's about creating a safe and dignified space for everyone. Thank you for giving me a second chance to do it right. I won't let you down." Evelyn closed the email, a small, genuine smile touching her lips. It was one email, one employee. But it was a start. It was proof that the system, however flawed, could be rewritten. She put her phone away, opened her book, and felt the familiar, gentle thrum of the Rolls-Royce engines. The plane pushed back from the gate, powerful and precise. As it accelerated down the runway and lifted into the sky, Evelyn looked out the window. Her sanctuary had been violated, but in reclaiming it, she had done more than just win a battle. She had set a new standard, forcing a behemoth corporation to aim higher. The ascent had been turbulent, but the view from up here, she reflected, was finally starting to look like progress. The story of Dr. Evelyn Reed isn't just a tale of satisfying karma. It's a powerful reminder that in our deeply interconnected world, the consequences of our actions can ripple out in ways we can never predict. A single moment of prejudice from Karen Sterling didn't just insult one person. It triggered a digital earthquake that shook a multi-billion-dollar corporation to its core. It shows that true power isn't always loud and flashy. Sometimes it's the quiet, unassuming woman in the sweatsuit who holds the keys to the entire system. Her calm, decisive action wasn't just about punishing the ignorant. It was about forcing an entire industry to confront its own biases and to build a better, more respectful standard for everyone. It's a lesson that dignity isn't a luxury. It's a critical part of the operating system. If this story of justice and accountability resonated with you, please take a moment to hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more real-life stories of karma and consequence. Click the notification bell so you never miss an update, and let us know in the comments below. What did you think of the way Dr. Reed handled the situation? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Thank you for listening.